Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode of H.O.W, the podcast about humans of Wharton. I'm very thrilled to have with us today Inna Karyeva, Wharton MBA class 2018. Welcome, Inna.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Inna, I wanted to talk about Ukraine today. And you are from Ukraine. Can you tell us your story?
Yes. So my parents and I immigrated to the U.S. When I was 10, and we moved from Kharkiv, Ukraine, to New York City. Kharkiv is a very interesting city. It is in the northeast of Ukraine, and it is about 30 miles from the border with Russia. And my family is actually literally 50-50. My grandmother, who I grew up with in Kharkiv, is actually from Eastern Russia and never spoke a word of Ukrainian. And my grandmother, who lives on the Russian border, grew up in a village in Ukraine. And at the time, of course, it was Soviet Union, and therefore they both landed, one was in Kharkiv, the other one is in Belgorod, which is the Russian side. And so growing up, I spent quite a bit of time going between both cities and crossing the border quite often. Growing up, and even when we came back after we moved here. So it's been a very interesting 3 weeks with family, of course, on both sides still, and impacted very differently in very different ways in the last month or so.
When the war started, you jumped into action. Tell us about your GoFundMe campaign.
Yeah, so I am not a very public person by any means. And I was having a sleepless night when the war broke out. And I'm not even a writer, which is most interesting, but I just had so many thoughts that it just kind of started to pour out of me. And I posted my story and about my grandmother's on Instagram. And it got very positive feedback and just a ton of support from friends and even just acquaintances that are not even very close with me. And I thought that that was just a tremendous opportunity to use my story and leverage it as potential ways to raise funds for families that we know personally in Ukraine and be able to help them directly, rather through, of course, the many, many funds that are trying to help Ukraine on the ground. We wanted a mechanism to get money directly to people, which has been an interesting journey in of itself. But that's really what started the GoFundMe. And as I have been just really grateful to raise over $20,000 now, we started to post a little bit about who the money is going to. And so far, the fund has supported 15 people in total, some of whom have actually been able to now leave Ukraine. And so the funds are going to supporting just day-to-day lives for those who stayed, to get bare necessities, food, water, any expenses that might come up, as well as supporting those who have left to even fund a room to rent in a house if they can find one. And then some of our friends who have left are now finding ways to help those who stayed behind. So it's been just an incredible journey, and just have been so amazed by humanity in the last, again, 3 weeks of just all of the support that it's received so far.
Yeah, it has been amazing. The Wharton community came through with massive support.
Yep, huge.
You probably get asked a ton of questions a ton of questions about how people can help. What do you usually tell your Wharton friends and friends outside of Wharton?
Yeah, so there are four organizations that I have been spreading the word about mostly. I mean, there are so many, right, that are trying to do work on the ground, and so focusing on even which five or four to pick is really hard. So I personally, my parents are doctors, and so we have also a lot of connections to the medical community. So I focus in on four organizations that are really helping either with medical supplies, on just bare necessities, and nonprofits on the ground. Some of them are actually based in, were started in our Ukrainian companies. One is called Project C.U.R.E. And so C.U.R.E. is responsible for sending large cargo ships with medical supplies to Ukraine and to medical facilities in Ukraine. The second one is Nova Ukraine. It is a nonprofit organization working very closely with civil activists and nonprofits on the ground, usually supporting just what's needed most, whether it's food, medical supplies, or anything else. The next one is Project Hope. It's a global health humanitarian organization, and they've primarily been focusing on helping those trying to cross the Ukrainian and Polish border and supporting refugees on both sides. And then the last one is Fight for Right. It is a Ukrainian organization really coordinating, again, anything that's needed, but primarily around shelter, evacuations, and emergency services for those on the ground. So those are the four that just I feel most passionately about and most connected to. But there are, of course, many more. And as I find more that are reliable and really bring help to the ground, I usually try to post it on one of my social media accounts as well.
We will post it in the description of this video as well,
Yep.
so that people can support their organizations of your choice.
Yep.
Inna, this war has literally split you in the middle.
Yeah.
How do you feel about your identity? Where do you stand vis-a-vis this conflict?
Yeah. So, also a great question. I have, so whenever anybody has asked me where I'm from until this conflict, I actually usually said I'm Russian because Kharkiv is, again, a very interesting city. It's got a lot of history with Russia as a country and as a nation. And so I grew up speaking Russian as my first language. I learned Ukrainian in school, but that was pretty much it. I didn't really speak it outside of the required lessons. And so I would just say I'm Russian. Since the conflict, I've now been saying, of course, I am Ukrainian because Kharkiv is definitely part of Ukraine. But to be honest, my identity is completely split. My family, a lot of them are still living on the Russian side of the border, even though half of them also grew up in Kharkiv. So it's been an interesting journey, and I would say that I still very much identify just 50-50. I feel so much and so much, heartbreak for our friends and family in Ukraine. And, watching pictures of the school that I went to has been destroyed. We don't know about the apartment where I grew up in that my grandmother owned, if it's still standing or not. But at the same time, I also really understand the sorrow and what the Russian side of the family as well is going through. And my heart breaks for them in very different ways, but as well. So I would say still 50-50, but I now say that I am Ukrainian if anybody asks me where I'm from.
The Russian government has fed massive propaganda to the Russian people. From what I observed with my Russian family is that it's working very well. what has been your experience with your family who live in Russia? What do they say? How do they feel about this?
They're just really heartbroken. I mean, I think it maybe is, what I don't know is whether the geography and where they are being so close to the border, if that's contributing any differently. You know, they've definitely never supported the government, but at the same time, I mean, they just, accept it for what it is, as everybody there has to. Um, we still talk to them daily, and so they get the real picture from us, and of course believe us and trust us. Um, but it's getting really hard for them in their city to not buy into the propaganda, not get, in trouble with the lawmakers and the police. I have a cousin who is very actively speaking out about the war and his complete, not support for it, but at the same time, um, it's a really tough environment right now to do that. And the reality is that anybody who shows their support for Ukraine and speaks out against the war, um, there's a very likely outcome that you are going to get sent to jail there for who knows how many years. And if you're in the jail system, it's not trackable like it is here. You can be completely lost to the world, whether sent to a concentration camp or who knows where else. And so it's a tough reality, because I think that they want to not believe what they're seeing, of course, but at the same time, the Russian government has made it close to impossible to do anything else.
How have you been handling this so far?
It's a day by day journey. When when Kharkiv was getting, when it was abundantly clear that Kharkiv was not going to survive as a city no longer, with all the bombs, it was just a really hard, tough 48 hours. You're just glued to every video, every picture that you see, and just consuming like the reality of, oh, it's not just a bomb here and there. The whole city will be under fire and destroyed, and they will survive, hopefully, and live through it and rebuild it. But that is the reality. And so once that sunk in, I wouldn't say it's been easier, but it just kind of brought the reality of, an unbelievable reality, honestly, that one person can destroy an entire country. And so it's been a day by day journey. We start every morning with checking in on everybody, just making sure that everybody is alive. We are grateful that so far everybody that we know is alive, which is definitely not what others can say for their families. And it's both a blessing and a curse in some ways, but it's been an interesting 3 weeks. So I would just say one day at a time. You never know what the day will bring. Our evening here is their nighttime, which is when it's been the worst, at least in Ukraine so far. The nights are really hard, and so just waking up every morning and again checking in on everybody, making sure they lived through the night, etc., has been critical. So day by day, but of course it does not compare to what they're going through on the ground and in living in either Ukraine or Russia right now.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I can second the experience. I I personally have been immensely supported and inspired by Ukrainian people uniting and uh, resolving not to give in to Putin's demand. What has your experience been on this?
Yeah, I mean, same. Honestly, and most of Ukraine too. I mean, especially in Kharkiv. I mean, you know this, of course, too. But Kharkiv is an interesting city. Again, I keep talking only about Kharkiv, but it's true for every city. But Kharkiv has its own identity, as every city does in Ukraine, and they're all very different, but very complementary to each other. Kharkiv has a lot of scholars. We have a really big university there, multiple universities. And so there's a lot of professionals there. And they're definitely not war experts or fighters or soldiers, but they've become soldiers, honestly, overnight. And I was talking to one of my parents' really close friends who is a physician, about 5 days in, and she said, "Yeah, by now we understand where the bombs are coming from. We know where the shelling is." So they, it's just they're so resilient and so brave, and I am endlessly inspired by them and their bravery. And there's a channel that I follow for Kharkiv that just shows basically day by day what's happening there. And yesterday they were showing taxi drivers who have united to clean up the rubble basically every single time that there's a bombing in any neighborhood. So it's just been unbelievably inspiring. They are so resilient. And, Kharkiv, being where it is on the border, has a lot of folks that previously, supported Russia, or, just it's very half and half, and it's very mixed, but they have just their strong identity of being from Kharkiv and Ukraine has really been, again, inspiring, which is why in the last 3 weeks it's become abundantly clear to me that I am Ukrainian, not Russian, and just continue to be really real inspired and in awe of just their day-to-day bravery to stand up to a really big bully on the ground who has unfortunately turned their lives upside down.
Yeah, Inna, since we have you on this podcast, Humans of Wharton is usually all about the personal story and the journey to Wharton. How does a Ukrainian immigrant girl from Kharkiv get to Wharton?
With a lot of help from my personal army. And from fellow Wharton alums support. When I started my career straight out of college, I got the privilege to work with Carolyn McGill, and with her support was able to eventually get to my journey to Wharton with a lot of support from my parents as well. It was an interesting journey. I'm an only child of basically a full family of doctors, not just my parents, but my grandmother, my cousin, my aunt. And so getting a degree post college was always a necessity, I would say. And being the only one not in the medical field, an MBA felt the most natural path. And of course, with my passion in healthcare, Wharton's healthcare program is, I still say, the best one. I mean, it's definitely top. And so it's been just an amazing privilege to be able to get there and to continue my career after Wharton's healthcare program as well.
Your parents have an amazing story of coming here to the States and becoming doctors here. Can you share some details about that?
Yeah, it's very unique. So when we first moved here, my dad had to. He basically went from being a very senior surgeon in his hospital of trauma in Kharkiv to, just we needed to get jobs to survive and to make a living here and to start to make a living here. So His first job was carrying fruits and vegetables for just a grocery store, which was just a giant shock of course, reality. And just my parents are unbelievably perseverance is one of their critical skills, and so he eventually got a job as a physician assistant in a hospital in Long Island, and so had to drive from Brooklyn for at least an hour and a half in our old minivan there and back just to have to work. And in parallel, we're studying for their USMLEs and then multiple steps. The unique part about my parents is they did not redo medical school here, which was a challenge of its own because you basically have to study and pass the tests on your own because you still have to study the entire curriculum of a medical school here in order to do that. And so while my dad worked, my mom would study all day as well as I went to school and all night. Eventually, both were able to pass all of the steps and match to residency, which was just a miracle. I remember sitting by our fax machine back in the day and just waiting for the match letters. And it was just an incredible journey. The unbelievable part is especially is that, I mean, my mother became a neuro-oncologist here, and she was a neurologist in Kharkiv. So getting the specialization has been just, again, watching her get there is an incredible journey, and just, continuing to not give up every step of the way. They had to retake some of the tests multiple times to pass. It's a really difficult journey, but I would say 10 years in, they both were able to finally become doctors here again.
And they didn't speak English when they got here.
They did not, and I remember it was always a journey to say who's going to speak first to ask a question or for directions or anything else. So they did not, and they fought very hard for my education here as well, not accepting no's at every step of the way, getting me into specialized schools or just to have an ability to take the test to get into a specialized school. And so they've been as amazing and persevering in my educational journey as well as theirs, and in parallel.
How do you think that shaped you as a person?
I think very strongly. I generally consider myself an operator, and no is never an option. There's always a path to get to a yes, through, again, just perseverance and getting creative, etc. And so it's shaped me significantly, and I am just always in continued awe of their journey, and it always pushes me to think how I can be a better person and do more for the community. One of the really unique things about my parents as well is they provide and have provided, even before the war, tremendous support to our family and friends back in Ukraine and Russia. And so I always grew up with, giving back is as important as, as moving forward here. So it's been a very unique perspective and a unique background to grow up in.
And how was Wharton for you?
It was great. I consider it my two-year vacation. But the connections that I was able to make were unbelievable. The program itself is unbelievable. And I would say that despite my passion for healthcare, some of my favorite classes I would have and journeys I would have never gone on traditionally. And so it was just a very, very unique point in time experience that I am forever just grateful for. And we have quite a few of us who are in Boston now who graduated from my year, and definitely made some lifelong friends as well as memories.
We usually ask this question from our guests. To me, Wharton is the place blank. How would you complete the sentence?
Very interesting question. To me, Wharton is family. They're an extension of they're just an extension of my family, and everybody that I came across there. I know that, close or non-close or non-acquaintance or acquaintance, we always support each other, which is what is the most important thing that my mother especially has always shared with me, is that family is everything, and they always support each other no matter what. And I've always felt extremely supported by our Wharton community, and they really are like family no matter where you are or what you're going through.
Yeah, and it showed in a big way with the C.U.R.E.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the Wharton community who has supported us in Ukraine in this most amazing way. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, extremely grateful. Thank you.
Inna, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I know it's been very difficult 3 weeks. And so I really appreciate you showing up for Ukraine.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to have our connection. And of course, both being from Kharkiv is a very unique experience. And I appreciate having somebody to go through the journey with me as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please subscribe, share this video, and stand with Ukraine.